Welcome to another Top 10 Thingies in Final Fantasy. Today we're going to be taking a look at Waterfalls. And you needn't worry, no Mikotes were harmed in the filming of this. First up on the list is Dravanian Hinterlands. Unless you're actively going after sightseeing logs, you may have missed this one. Right across Faliak River, next to Alexander, is this small little waterfall hanging out of the cliff face. This seems to be closest to a block waterfall, the very traditional style waterfall that you would probably see in most media. I don't know if this would be classified as subterranean because it emerges from a cave and it's not inside a cave. As you go farther back from the cliff, you can see this massive crack all along the side where the waterfall entrance is. Could there be shifting plates happening right in this area? Maybe the river underwater is causing some sort of damage to the structure of this cliff face. I wonder if eventually this area would completely erode this cliff away and we'd see even more of this cliff fall straight into the Faliak River. Another cute thing about this one is you can land in it. Makes for a nice little spot if you're like a frog or something. I don't know why else you would be here. Looking at the entrance of this cave and going at it from a higher angle, it very much could be directly linked to St. Mosian's Arboretum. And if you're interested in that place, I did take a look inside that in a previous video. We also have these little mushrooms growing inside here, which farther implicates it could be attached to the Arboretum. We don't really see much any unique flora in this area outside of going directly into the Arboretum. It's very standard pines and grass everywhere. Coming up next, we're heading over to the peaks, and we're going to be checking out two waterfalls. I almost consider them one waterfall, just because they're so adjacent to each other, and I just want to talk about both of them since they flow directly into each other. The Heather Falls, the ones up above, and the Mason's Falls down below. There's a bit of a strange inconsistency with how the Heather Falls are described in-game. One entry refers to these as a cascade, while the other refers to them as a waterfall, which a waterfall would make more sense from what I looked into. Taking a look up above Heather Falls, we can see that there isn't really much logic for where this water is coming from. In the distance, we can see what I assume is leftover water from the 6 Umbral Calamity flood. But the elevations of these are quite drastically different compared to the actual falls. Makes for a funny thing that the devs didn't really want us to see or think too much about. But the fact that they put the water back there is kind of funny to me. This is a segmented waterfall, one that separates into multiple flows. Makes for a very nice vista right in front of the hidden tier. They do a really good job of making the water direction flow in this one. I assume by this expansion, they've had that quite figured out by now. But you will see in later waterfalls, there's some very strange things happening with how you think the waterfall would function in real life. The water between Heather Falls and Mason's Falls is quite shallow. So seeing a massive waterfall immediately after this, and then transitioning right into a massive waterfall, where's this water coming from? That's a lot of water with no reserve happening. Still, this one's cool, just from a lore perspective, that there is so much water from the Calamity that even years and years later, we are still seeing it drain away. Quick portal over to another star. We're heading to Kholusia and taking a look at the White Oil Falls. This one's hard to miss. It's right there as soon as you enter. The tallest waterfall I can think of that we can directly interact with. As I was saying earlier, this one has some very funny animations to it, and the sightseeing log for this even describes it. So I wonder if this is a nod at the devs just forgetting about how they animated this, or maybe they ran out of time when doing it. The entry takes notice of how slow the water actually flows in this waterfall, and you can see that quite noticeably once you go to near the top of it. Looks very viscous and almost honey-like with how slow it moves. I wonder if this sightseeing log was a joke at the devs, forgetting that this animation was as slow as it was. Maybe this waterfall was different at one point, or they just pulled it from a different source. Besides that, they did a really good job of making this one feel like it was on a cliffside. You could see all this misted water flying off the cliff due to the winds, much like you would see in a horsetail waterfall. They made this waterfall feel very believable. Another cool thing that I like about this one is we got all these little cliff parts hanging around it. And there's actually some rare gathering nodes on here. Makes for a fun gathering location, or a nice hangout spot with a quite nice vista to look at. This one, as you get farther away from it, it feels almost insubstantial from a distance, despite its size. That just goes to show how massive this cliff face really is. Going all the way over to Ivalice, straight into Orbonne Monastery. As soon as you get past the first trash mobs, you're greeted with the entrance to Orbonne Monastery and this seemingly unending stream of waterfalls. These waterfalls can be categorized in a few different ways. They share similar traits to plunged waterfalls, cataract waterfalls because of the immense amount of water just non-stop gushing, and as well as segmented waterfalls as we look towards the top of the cliff edge. We can see it's quite splintered in how it's being distributed. Looking down and below, we can see it's going into rapids as well. We don't get very many depictions of rapids in Final Fantasy, so it's nice to see these show up. As we head for the entrance of the monastery, we get this very pleasant sound of the waterfalls slowly becoming muffled. It's a very nice touch. We'll take a little listen right here. Now that's not the end of these waterfalls. As we go even deeper into the monastery, we are greeted with these subterranean waterfalls. These ones, I just wonder what the logistics are behind this. Were these in this subterranean area before due to erosions on the waterbed above us? Or was this actually created, hollowed out by workers painstakingly, which I could not imagine how brutal that working conditions would be. Regardless, the building plan for this is quite unreasonable. Heading back over to Dravania, we are heading over to the 100 Throes and the Iron Feast. As we head over here, we are greeted with a segmented waterfall that also seems to be sloped enough to be considered a cascade waterfall. This truly is a tragedy meets beauty due to the events in the past of the betrayal of man and dragon. We got all these really cool different streams going across, fanning out into the water. You can tell this is definitely earlier in their technology because sometimes the water doesn't fully flow the direction it should be. And the Iron Feast itself has been flooded over, and now we have all these very cool waterfalls. It almost seems intentional the way the water flows in between these various levels within this temple. We've seen how the water climbs down the stairs. They actually took the time to make individual steps for the water flowing on these. I wonder if this is pipelined and how they're able to make flowing water on stuff, because it's funny seeing some things in this game have a lot more attention to detail, but then as we go further down, there's like small little errors with how the water flows. Could just purely be they ran out of time or they overlooked it. As we look at the back behind the Iron Feast, we can see what I assume is supposed to be a water gate, since a bridge wouldn't really go anywhere looking around here. It seems like this area might have been designed before they decided to add flying to Heavensward, because if you fly above this water gate, you can see it goes into nothing and comes from nothing. Just a very beautiful place for how war-torn it is. Now we're heading into a rather infamous dungeon, the Cutter's Cry. Is this one a waterfall? I'll let you be the judge. There's some things where I read that it seems very consistent of a waterfall. But in the same time, there's not a lot of flowing water. I felt like I wouldn't have any other opportunity to really talk about this area outside of these. We have all these holes and various tunnels created by the ants. And as a result, we likely had a water bed above all of these holes. And now the water from whatever water source was up there is now just cascading down indefinitely. I wonder if this waterfall is imperial and eventually during different seasons we might not even see water flow from this area. These are probably the most free-falling plunge waterfalls that we have in the game, outside of one that we see in the Sunken City. If these holes are indeed the results of the ants, they have incidentally created a very bountiful and life-filled ecosystem. We have all this flora surrounding this oasis pond with fairly nice shaded conditions and what I assume is going to be a very humid place. We even have various fauna gathered around here as well. Another really cool part about this little area is this dungeon is affected by the day-night cycle. So as you go through this dungeon, this vista of waterfalls will have a very unique look to them every time you come through. Not that you want to be in this dungeon. This beautiful view of the stars at night. Fanland's skybox in particular at night is quite pretty. Back to Nordvan, we're heading to Ihl Mheg to look at this tiered waterfall. Way off in the distance, across the Longmere Lake, we have this small little isolated cliff face that we get to go to for various quests. This one does a really good job of making the illusion that there is a true water source in the areas that we can't reach where this waterfall comes from. On this cliff face as well, we can see that the cliff face is extremely eroded. Another very nice example of the constant flow of water eroding these cliff faces. And we even get a little bonus waterfall on the left side here. This is another one of those ones that makes for a beautiful vista spot, just a nice place to hang out. I'm surprised we don't see more people RP up here, or at least I've never seen them, and I'm on Matthias, so there's a lot of RP here. Where it's nestled on this cliff shelf, we get a lot of really cool shadows as we go to between various times of day. We get all these shadows dropping from the different cliff faces surrounding it. Now this part's really cool, and we get to see how the devs handle viewing waterfalls from underneath, since we can go underwater here, and I think they did a pretty good job. I feel like it would be a lot more violent than what we're seeing depicted here, but overall it feels very believable. And it's just not something you would be looking for or even thinking about the devs implementing, but they did it. They made sure that the water from the waterfall was disrupting from underneath. Very cool. I really like this. Up next is the Apkallu Falls. But these aren't tall enough to be falls. But these aren't falls, they're so tiny. Ah, but they are technically tall enough to be considered waterfalls. As silly as that is. This just shows how inconsistent everything is with what people consider waterfalls. Because looking at this at first glance, you just wouldn't think it would be considered one, just because of how tiny it is. And I kind of love that. This one has a bit of logic to where it could possibly be flowing from. If we take a look at the backside, we can see that it flows from this river behind it. Now, the heights of these is a little misaligned, but I think it's close enough that it's believable. Sometimes it's nice to just break some rules, but still make it feel like it really is something that could possibly be happening. And that's just the cool part of video games, is making something believable, but then stretching it to make some very impressive and cool locations. There's not much to talk about with this one outside of that, but I did find the entry for the sightseeing log funny. And the reason this is named the Apkallu Falls is somebody tried to breed Apkallus in the linn of this waterfall. The linn being this lower part that the waterfall is flowing into. As you can tell, he's not here. It didn't work out. Thought we were done with dungeons? Think again! Now we are in Lapis, Manalis. There aren't many places where we can see frozen over waterfalls, but I decided to go with this one because of various reasons we'll see. Looking at these first two waterfalls right near the entrance, we get a lot of vertical runoffs. You can see it trying to build up various times as the water freezes over multiple times over and over. So this waterfall must have taken quite a long time to freeze over, and given the size, that's not too surprising. And even looking farther down, as you can peek, there is a even larger waterfall that just goes down into the abyss of fog. This waterfall, we get to go on its top and follow the frozen river all the way through and get another sight of a very good job showing a believable source for the waterfall where we hit this second waterfall and it keeps going beyond farther into areas we can't see. These vertical runoffs are very funny to see because you can see the individual models repeated over and over. It must have been very hard to do this without making a custom model for the entire waterfall. And since this happened, when we take a closer look at it, you really see through the cracks of the video game design of it, where they're just placing this vertical runoff over and over and over. But at a passing glance, I do think it looks very nice, which is all you really need. Now, the reason I chose these waterfalls is one would think the farther you go into this dungeon, the whole cave would be frozen over. But as you slowly go through the cave, more and more water starts to appear. And you're realizing this cave isn't frozen over like you might expect. And this is very likely because of the large cerulean deposits that we find deeper in this cave system. All this mass of flammable liquids. We can even see some of the cerulean has been ignited. All this mass of cerulean definitely explains why it's not frozen. I just love the contrast of the frozen outsides, slowly everything melting the deeper you go in, just to be greeted by this ignited cerulean towards the end of it, and this massive reservoir of cerulean. It's a pleasant contrast. On our last stop, we are heading to one of my favorite zones again, Yanxia. This place is just so dense with so many different environmental details. And this waterfall in particular, I absolutely love. There was so much care put into this one. This location is called the Heron's Flight. As we pass by it, we are greeted with a tiered waterfall. Some of it natural and some of it man-made. If you were to keep following this river down the stream, it would eventually lead into another abandoned rice paddy field. This area is really cool, not just from function, but from a lore perspective as well. The neighboring village of the Mai uses this place as a source to water their various crops. You can even see up near the reservoir, there is a natural spring, which is amazing. We don't get very many indicators to where these water sources are coming from with these waterfalls. And now we get a direct look at one. This natural spring comes straight up and distributes all the water. We get a good logic for where all this water is coming from, and I love that. If you look on the left side of this spring, we even have a second water gate that has been closed, showing that they are controlling the flow of the water for their rice paddy fields. This area is even surrounded by water sprites, which is very nice addition. How they place the water on this Watergate surface seems to be very similar to the technology they used for these stairs. I wouldn't be surprised if it is the same method applied here. And we also have these abandoned stairs, so I wonder how they come up to do maintenance on this place for how much detail was put into everything else. Maybe they're just really big fans of the leap of faith at the Gold Saucer. They did such a good job of making this place feel very lived in compared to previous villages and cities we've seen. And that does it for another top 10. Thank you for watching. Over here on the top, another top 10 video if you want to watch that. Down below, another video. Over here, subscribe. And thank you for watching. Bye bye.